I'm here today with Congressman Jack Bergman from Michigan. Thank you so much for being here, Congressman. So some Republicans are talking about the future of aid to Ukraine and questioning whether funding levels should stay at the same levels, given that the Biden administration hasn't laid out an end game. What would you say about the future?
Well, the funding levels are always going to be a discussion, but when you combine the funding levels with the types of equipment that we're sending, that's probably more important than the funding level. But the most important thing that especially Congress should be talking about is the accountability when we send something, money, equipment, to Ukraine. We need to account that it got there. It didn't get sidetracked into a black market, but it got utilized in the way that was intended. Because when you do that and have that accountability, then we're going to understand more on a lot of things. Number one, have we got our system right? Number two, how does our equipment work? And number three, most importantly, is it having the effect in deterring and defeating Putin and his gang of thugs when it comes to them trying to do what they're trying to do.
Congress has sent $113 billion to Ukraine so far. Only about $62 billion of that has gone towards, what you're talking about, military equipment, direct security aid. So some Republicans have discussed looking at that other half of the aid that's essentially propping up the government. Do you think that's an area where Republicans could cut some spending?
Well, I think, again, cutting as opposed to refocusing. For example, there's a significant amount of that money that's going to humanitarian aid, not warfighting. I mean, they're whether it's food, whether it's medical equipment, whether it's just basic telecommunications equipment to keep communications going. So the number one thing we need to be doing as Congress is oversight on the accountability as to if we can get it 90% accurate, we're doing one heck of a job.
Does the Biden administration need to lay out what the strategic endpoint of the conflict should be?
I don't think they can, and I don't think that necessarily any administration could do that task. What we do need to be able to lay out is one of the lines that President Obama was famous for, drawing a line in the sand, a red line,
right,
but then forgetting about it and crossing it anyway. We need to be able to have markers as a country, because the success in Ukraine, you got all our NATO allies watching as well. And if how do you build their confidence? And then they have to step up too. This isn't just a free ride for anybody. But when you have countries like Sweden and Finland, who all of a sudden they're trying to join NATO, which was just the opposite of what Putin was trying to achieve. He was trying to neuter NATO.
The debt ceiling needs to be raised in the next few months, and so part of these conversations about reconsidering the aid to Ukraine has been taking place in the context of where Republicans can cut spending. And the Pentagon is, an enormous part of the budget. Is any kind of national security or military spending, do you think, on the table in the debt ceiling talks?
Well, again, people tend to lump military spending into one thing. War fighting, no. But bureaucratic waste. Bureaucratic waste in the Pentagon, they don't have a corner on that market. You can pick any
Right.
big government agency, and the amount of waste, that if we could cut waste by 10% in the federal government, we would have more than enough money, many times over, to send double the aid to Ukraine and other countries, if we could cut 10% of federal government waste.
Republicans aren't going to touch Social Security or Medicare or, the national security elements of the Pentagon budget, and waste is sort of a nebulous topic. What do you think Republicans should be looking at to cut?
I think, again, bureaucratic waste. I've seen it in my time in uniform and dealing in the Pentagon. I mean, I built an annual budget for about just under $1 billion a year. That was my command budget. So I built budgets in the Pentagon from that side. So seeing it here on the Budget Committee, I know how the game is played. So where the cuts have to come is within the bureaucracy, because that eats up so much money. And the other piece is incentivize, as best you can, but incentivize the federal government to reduce what we call on the Budget Committee improper payments. We spend roughly $150 billion a year in improper payments. Think of that. If we cut it by 10%, I mean, that's $15 billion a year right there. But we should be able to do more than that. Look at your own house first, is what I was always taught by my parents growing up. Control your own spending. What can you do to help others as appropriate, but don't spend more than you take in.
There's been some criticisms of the Biden administration, of Congress, for focusing so much on Ukraine and Russia that perhaps not enough attention is being paid to the threat posed by China in terms of money or foreign policy. Do you agree with that criticism?
I think what I've heard the people criticize are ones who probably don't have a whole lot of national security and military operational background, so I can tell you for a fact that there's a lot of attention being paid to China, especially when it comes to Taiwan, because that's the wolf closest to the sled, if you will, over there in that part of the world. I'm on armed services as well as the Veterans Affairs and budget, but I can tell you for a fact that Congress, at least on the armed services committees, as well as others, and whether it's foreign affairs, intel, are paying very close attention to China. I can't speak for what the administration is doing, or even the State Department, but I can tell you what I see in my area of responsibility here.
In your area of responsibility, you've pushed recently to anti-influence bills. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, pure and simple. If you're a foreign government or an agent of a foreign government, number one, you have to register. You don't get special rules. There is no slick in the system. And so this is about accountability, that there is not malign influence being exercised, if you will, by other governments from other countries. Register, be honest, don't try to cheat the system, because we're going to find out, especially in this day and age of the way we can find out through the cyber world and other information sources.
The Biden administration shifted its stance recently on TikTok. Now they're going to back a bill that would give the government more room to regulate or even ban TikTok. Why do you think the momentum shifted? So Democrats seemed against that, and now, it seems like a more popular idea.
Well, the Democrats want to get elected and reelected in 2024. They'd love to. They want to, again, they will go after any issue that he thinks that'll get them votes. And you know what? There's some of that in the Republican Party too. Let's call it like we see it. But the Democrats have mastered that. They've taken it to PhD level operations.
What is it about the TikTok issue, though, that you think Democrats have recognized the popularity of potentially regulating it?
They look very closely at what's going to influence their well-being as a party. Right now, they are the party of spending. They are the party of truly excessive regulation, the party of excessively long COVID shutdown. They're the party of excess. And one of the things that the Republican Party is, but doesn't message very well, we are the party of let's be reasonable, let's secure our borders, let's make our citizens safe and secure, let's get our kids educated in a way that they think, not just react as being told what to do. The Democrats want you to think that they're going to make life easy for you and you don't have to do anything.
Are there, finally, any ways that you see Republicans and Democrats being able to work on measures to counter China? You see a lot of that bipartisanship that's rare on the China subcommittee. Are there things in the works?
Well, we're going to, and in fact, that's a great point, because Mike Gallagher, who's chairing the Select Committee on China, that committee and how he runs that and brings in the Democrats who are on the committee will go a long way towards setting the benchmark for working together when it comes to understanding what China's goals are. As Americans, we make three mistakes. We have for a long time. Number one, on the international stage, we think that other countries have the same values that we do. We think they have the same goals as we do. And number three, we think they like us, none of which are the case with China. The Chinese people, that's a different story. We're talking here the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. That's who runs the show in China. And if maybe we should give some of our folks who don't understand how it works, a year's opportunity to study in China and be one of their labor force.
Well, Congressman Bergman, thank you so much for being here today. You can get more political reporting at washingtonexaminer.com.